in these big projects, well, we're going to move to Gabriela next, but in these big projects about getting better evidence that's relevant for policy. We've talked about a number of major areas where there's this big gap between what patients want and need and what could be delivered efficiently in terms of a reformed healthcare system and what we're actually doing and how to close those gaps through policy. We talked earlier, and you heard from Greg and others about opportunities in the biomedical innovation side. And we're going to give one example of that in the context of moving to more value in utilizing drugs. We're going to go through that with antibiotic resistance with Gabriela's presentation now.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. So if you can move to the next slide. Thank you. So we all know that in the past, I would say probably 20 years, we have seen a tremendous innovation in biomedical product with drug and devices. We've seen 20% decline in cancer death in the past 20 years, 80% decline in HIV death. We have seen 7,000 drugs that actually had a first-in-class classification, which means that they're drugs that are meeting the unmet medical need. A recent pharma report put out that there are 700 drugs in the pipeline that is going to address rare diseases, which affect 3 million Americans currently. However, these drugs come with a really high cost. And one way to address this cost conundrum is sometimes to direct price control, but also major patent reform, like we're seeing the one that is floating now on biologic, moving the patent from 12 years to 7 years. Other ways is really to look at payment and delivery reform to really drive value and novel financing mechanism. So how can we stimulate innovation while also rewarding value? One way is to look at, has the healthcare expenditure continued to rise, more emphasis on value, which hopefully is a product of quality and cost together and being synergistic versus being antagonists one to each other. Federal and private payer are increasingly leveraging APM, alternative payment models, that shift the portion of the risk of providing the health care from the payer to the physician and the manufacturer. And this creates new financial accountabilities for a provider. So all these changes are really affecting how this incentive going to fit with use of cost therapy, particularly those that actually have a low impact on outcomes. If you move to the next. So how do we link prescription drug spending to utilization and value? There are payment arrangements that are being explored to really align the shift to risk sharing for better value. There is a true shift moving from fee-for-service to adoption of alternative payment model. And we're looking at ways to really help including drugs into the APM model. And one way is the value-based contracting and risk-sharing agreement, as we've seen putting together by Cigna and Novartis with Entresto, AstraZeneca and Express on IRESA. So a lot more adoption of this risk-sharing agreement that actually have been adopted much more in Europe. PMPM on bundle payment and physician-administered drug tied to the quality benchmark. And really broader use of value framework. There are currently at least five value frameworks. A lot of work is being done and is continuing to be done in evaluating what are the gaps in this value framework, how we can move forward in the best way to capture value, but not just for the provider and manufacturer, but also from the patient perspective. So those are all challenges that healthcare providers has. And as we look at a steep learning curve and trying to shift the new payment structure, we need to think about new ways to really integrate the pharmaceutical and medical product in the healthcare of today. So the Duke Margolis approach is really with the goal of building a path to value in developing medical product. We want to continue to have this kind of innovation. As I said, there are a lot of drugs in the pipeline that will treat potentially and maybe cure the rare diseases like we've seen with cystic fibrosis and others. We want to have a better alignment of incentive to improve value and outcome. We want to move away from fee-for-service and really move to value. And we want to continue, as I think Jillian has pointed out, to look at the evaluation of the potential cost and benefit of elevated treatment and really look at the broader societal perspective and impact. So the way we want to approach this from the Duke Margolis is to really focus on this high priority where the cost of drugs is really high. And like Greg mentioned, curative. There are gene therapy now coming to the market. There are with the tag price of $1 billion. So really focusing on this very innovative product, but that really comes with very high cost. And really tap into the expertise of key stakeholders that live and breathe this issue every day. And we plan to do this by creating an advisory board that is composed by payers, manufacturers, patient advocacy organization, academia, and so forth. And then leverage really the platform that we have in DC by convening multi-stakeholders and having very deep discussion about how can we tackle this issue and not just discuss, but actually provide policy recommendation that can be implemented in the healthcare of today. And then, of course, one important step is really to release those recommendations and provide, increase the awareness in DC and beyond. So the next couple of slides, I want to talk to you about a project that we just kicked off 3 months ago in collaboration. Monica Schneider works with me on this. It's about looking at stimulating antimicrobial drug development through economic incentives. In 2013, actually, CDC put out a list of 23 drug-resistant infections that are high threat. Unfortunately, only 15 drugs that actually address this infection have been developed in the past 20 years, and only half are in the pipeline address this issue. But however, in 4 million of Streptococcus pneumonia a year, about 1.2 million are actually resistant, which cause about 8,000 deaths a year. One other example of how antimicrobial resistance is really affecting patients every day is that there are 250,000 C. difficile infections requiring hospitalization every year, and this costs $1 billion to the healthcare. And 90% of these patients are actually 65 and older, so that's more geared to the Medicare population. So one way we want to really tackle this issue, on top of the fact that there are very little drugs in the pipeline, and once they got to the market, they really are not able to have a return on investment because of the large generic market that currently is putting these innovative drugs on the shelf in case just you need it. So there are true market failure that needs to be fixed, not just on the scientific side, but also on the post-marketing side. Therefore, what we need is to invest in the development of novel antimicrobial and other drugs to prevent and treat active infection. We need effective and broadly supported approach to combating resistance, like good surveillance and stewardship program. But also, we need to talk about access, and this is something that is being talked up broadly at a global level. The next. This is just a quick slide that show you how in US there has been some approaches to really help spur innovation in the drug development for antimicrobial. So different incentive really address different need in the life cycle of a drugs. At the beginning, there are ways like grants to support research and discovery and support clinical trials expenditure, versus in the later stage, there are maybe market exclusivity or market voucher that can potentially help expand the return on investment for this drug. However, all these incentives are still tied to the volume. There is not yet been an economic incentive that untie sales volume to return on investment. So if you go to the next slide. So for us at Duke Margolis, what we want to do is to actually identify those promising linkage approaches and reimbursement that can incentivize the development, but also continue to support the stewardship. So what we have done thus far is we engage a broad-based stakeholder. We create an advisory group that really has payers, manufacturer, patient advocacy organization, and provider, and really have them focus on knowing that this is a huge issue and a huge threat for the country. What are the best method and economic incentive where we can use within the U.S. system to stimulate innovation, but also reward drugs once they get to the market. So we have 2 milestones. One is a expert workshop in July. This workshop will focus on evaluating the different economic incentives that have been already evaluated in Europe and bring it into the US and see how they are applicable to the US healthcare system where there are multiple payers compared to Europe. And then also looking at implementation challenges. Because we have a fragmented healthcare system with medical benefit and pharmacy benefit, private versus public payers, there is going to be challenges actually implementing any of the incentives. So a lot of the focus and working closely with the payer were really to look at how we can implement this. And then the last milestone, at least for this project for this year, is to have a large public meeting where we can actually engage the broader community in a conversation about funding mechanisms. So, because at the end of the day, even if we find the best way to pay for, the mechanism to pay for it, we still have the question, who's going to pay for it? So definitely we need to involve a much broader group, including the government, to have this conversation. And then continue to work on implementation challenges. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great. Thanks very much, Gabriela.